Please welcome the White House Senior Advisor to the USCTO, Executive Office of the President, Seth Andrew.
Good morning, Games for Change. It is really good to see everyone here. I am so excited to introduce you to my boss, the President of the United States.
My parents invested in me, my grandparents invested in me, but my country invested in me. And I want America to now invest in you. We know that the nation that goes all in on innovation today will own the global economy tomorrow. Teachers and principals in schools from Tennessee to Washington, D.C. are making big strides in preparing students with the skills for the new economy. Problem solving, critical thinking, science, technology, engineering, math. I want you to know why it matters that we make sure technology is available to every child. Imagine what it could mean for a girl growing up on a farm to be able to take AP Biology or AP Physics even if her school is too small to offer it because she's got the access to technology allows her to take those classes online. Imagine what it means for a boy with an illness that confines him sometimes to home, where he can join his classmates for every lesson with FaceTime or Skype. And in an age when the world's information is just a click away, it demands that we bring our schools and libraries into the 21st century. If America pulls together now, if we do our part to make sure every young person can go as far as their passion and their hard work will take them, whether it's to Mars or to the bottom of the ocean or to anywhere on this planet where you've got an internet connection. If we commit ourselves to restoring opportunity for everybody, then we can keep the American dream alive for generations to come. The future belongs to young people with an education and the imagination to create. That is the source of power in this century. You get to decide what comes next. You get to choose where change will take us. Just imagine what you can create in the years to come.
So the president is someone who has inspired me and so many other people to come into government and to join this mission that he has been on since taking office to transform what schools look like in America. And as I was introduced, I'm Seth Andrew. I work for Megan Smith, the United States Chief Technology Officer in the Executive Office of the President. And I'm so honored to be with you today because when the President says he wants to see you create the schools of the future and the opportunities of the future, he's talking about the people in this room. You are creating those tools to transform our schools. But there's a lot of work that we need to do to get there. And so I'm honored to be here, and I'm grateful to Eric and the whole Games for Change team and my colleague Marvin and others who are here, the former OSTP team that is here, to tell you how important this is to the president, to the administration, that we are part of this community trying to transform what schools look like to become more future ready. And the question for you, Games for Change, is are you future ready? And I want you to think about this for a second, because although we think of ourselves in this room, and I certainly did when I was a principal and a teacher and a superintendent of a school district, I thought of myself on the cutting edge. But we realize now that there is so much to be done that is not just on the cutting edge that the tools now allow for. So the president, when he talks about becoming future ready, when he talks about building those skills, recognized really early in his presidency that we couldn't do any of the things we imagined until our schools had a very basic idea of connectivity. And he basically realized through a bunch of data that we were able to capture that schools in America had less bandwidth than the average Starbucks. And in this country, he said, where we expect free Wi-Fi with our coffee, we should definitely demand it in our schools. And so the first step to transforming those schools to be able to provide true games for change and really rethink the way that we learn in schools and classrooms all across the country was to provide that bandwidth, provide that connectivity. And so we launched Connect Ed. And Connect Ed to help provide more than $2 billion in federal funding directly to school districts. We modernized the E-rate program that allows school districts, especially for low-income kids, to get more access to that bandwidth that they deserve, that has become a level playing field fundamental in our schools today. And then we partnered with the private sector, and the private sector stepped up to offer $2 billion more in additional services and tools and products for schools with low-income students to use. And so we moved the needle, and we're close to closing that connectivity gap, and we're going to get to 99% of students in America with high-speed broadband before we leave office in 209 days. And I'm incredibly proud of the team and the president and the policy agenda that has led that, with people like Games for Change pushing and demanding and making sure that this was on the advocacy agenda. So thank you for continuing to push for the Connect Ed priorities and others. But that is only one step of the puzzle. That is not yet getting the classrooms that we imagine and the engaging, meaningful, fun, joyful, exciting learning opportunities that all of us want to see for our own kids and certainly for kids across the country. And so the next barrier that we realized, and I worked with Richard Collada, who you heard from yesterday, and Eric Martin at the Department of Education, to launch something called Future Ready. And the idea of Future Ready was that the barrier to our success after we get connectivity was the adults. It wasn't the kids. It wasn't the parents. It was the adults. It was the teachers, and it was the principals, and it was the superintendents in particular, who were very often older, more traditionally trained, non-tech savvy folks who want to move in the right direction but don't have the skills to do so. So the next thing we did was we tried to find the superintendents who were on that cutting edge. And we went out to the country. There are 16,000 school districts in the country. And I ran a network that started here in New York called Democracy Prep, which has 20 schools. And it's a $100 million a year operation. It's a big thing. But it's one of just 16,000 school districts in America. And most superintendents were not yet thinking in a future-ready way. So we had to ask them, will you step up and pledge your district to moving in this direction? Moving in a direction with more engagement, more excitement, more meaningful interaction, more interactivity, all of the things that Games for Change community stands for. And these superintendents, now more than 2,000 of those 16,000 have signed this pledge to say they're moving in this direction. And so every star you see on this map, and actually more since this map was made, are superintendents who've said, we want our district to move in this direction, which was so important to say first, I'm stepping up to be there. But yet, that's not enough. So we can have connectivity, and we can have a commitment. But the next thing we need for teachers, for adults, for superintendents is professional development. Because if you've never done this, if you've never incorporated games into your regional or district plan, if you've never worked with your school board to figure out how this can count for certain credits, if you've never sat down and said, we need to have a game design course in our high school, things that to us may seem obvious and necessary, to most superintendents in the country don't yet. And even the cutting edge 2,000 that said, we're going to take this pledge, still have work to do. And so we launched these regional summits, and the regional summits were an effort to get superintendents to step up and learn the skills they would need to understand how to take advantage of the connectivity, advantage of the open educational resources and openly licensed resources, take advantage of them in their museums and libraries and cultural institutions, create maker spaces, do things like using devices for kids in ways that were not just digitizing paper products. And so we had to find a way to do that with the superintendents who were very often the barriers to change and the problem in terms of moving really quickly in the pace that we wanted in the time that we have left. And so we've been doing that around these regional summits, and we've also wanted to give them lift. We've wanted to come up underneath them to say, you can do this and we're going to help. We're going to create a national conversation around these issues. And so Gallup did a survey in partnership with Google and some others that found that 9 out of 10 parents wanted their students to learn computer science. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 parents agree on basically nothing. And we got 9 out of 10 parents in the country to say that we want our students to learn computer science. And so that's why Megan and the president launched Computer Science for All just a few months ago in January. And Computer Science for All was an initiative born of many years of work, of hard work from people in this room and at the White House and beyond, to say that every school in America should be able to offer computer science, so that we don't just become the consumers of the Games for Change, but we become the creators of the Games for Change. And those kinds of opportunities are missing primarily in our low-income schools. They are primarily missing for students of color. They're primarily missing in schools that don't have the resources to say, we're going to prioritize this. And so Computer Science for All was a request to Congress to say we need $4 billion in federal funding to provide computer science for all across the country. You'll hear later today from the good work that was started in New York, which is one of our models. But there are pockets now popping up all over the country, from Arkansas to Washington State, to governors that totally disagree on their worldview, co-signed an editorial where they said this is a national priority that our states have stepped up to prioritize. And so we're excited for the progress of computer science for all, and we're excited for the opportunity for every student to get there, but we continue to need your help. We need you to step up and ask your school committee members, to find your elected official and let them know that these are priorities for you if they're priorities for your community. And you have to identify the things that matter, that are the roadblocks that are getting in the way of the superintendents who want to make these changes in schools, like adopting Games for Change tools. And one of the other barriers we realized after connectivity and a commitment and professional development is that we didn't have enough technical people in government to help create these policies. So if we want to create computer science for all, we still need people in governments, in cities, in states, in federal government who can actually understand what that means, how to implement it, how to teach it, how to put it in practice in classrooms. And so the president appointed in 2009, one of his first new appointments was the Chief Technology Officer of the United States of America. And for a $4 trillion operation, there had never been a CTO. And that's kind of insane, and yet the president realized based on a high-tech campaign that he needed to bring in technical talent into government. And so he started with the first two CTOs, and especially after a little website you might have heard called healthcare.gov, the president recognized that we had to bring not only consultants and contractors in to solve these problems, we need to actually have them in government at the table designing the challenges. And so that's what we call a new approach to TQ. TQ is what my boss Megan calls the thing that we need most to bring into government, because we have a lot of people, like in this room, with IQ. We have some people in government with EQ. I'm not one of them. We have a lot of people who are passionate about their issues, but we didn't have a lot of TQ, technology quotient. And so we brought in people like Megan and others who were able to think about the world in a way that, in Silicon Valley seemed totally normal, but in Harlem, New York seemed totally foreign. And so bringing these TQ folks in was what helped us to turn the healthcare.gov project into a success, what helped us to now save more than $1 trillion for American healthcare customers so that they can now have healthcare with the lowest uninsured rate in history. And those were made possible because of bringing TQ into government. It wasn't just policy, it wasn't just IQ, it wasn't just legislation, it was actually TQ designing systems that got those folks to be able to come in. And so bringing that technological capacity within government is something that I want you all to think about personally. Because in addition to building gaming companies and designing games and thinking about the projects that you're thinking about now, you also need to think about tours of service, tours of duty, where you come into government, whether that's city, state, or federal government, to actually serve your country, serve your community, and help them learn the things that you know, because they wouldn't know. The federal government wouldn't know without Megan and Todd Park and people on the OSCP team how to get this stuff done. And not only that, but they've now helped to create a playbook. So the playbook is going to seem familiar to us because this is sort of how the digital world works. We understand what people need. We address the whole experience from start to finish. We make it simple and intuitive. We build the services using agile and iterative processes. We structure our budgets to support delivery. We assign one leader and hold them accountable. We bring experienced teams. We choose modern technology stacks. We deploy in flexible hosting environments. We automate testing and deployment. We manage security privacy through reusable processes. We use data to drive our decisions, and we default to open. And I say all that now in the present tense, but just a few years ago, that was not true of federal government. Very few of these 13 items were true. So now that we have that playbook, we get to run it over and over again for the benefit of the American people. So for example, we've launched the College Scorecard, which instead of just having a government website, we launched an API that allowed that data from ED to come around the country, and we've now had 10 million people pull that API. On analytics.usa.gov, you can go right now on your phone and find out exactly how many people are on federal websites and which federal websites are there at the highest part on the ranking chart today. The Opportunity Project deals with housing and opportunity. Vote.gov helps you identify ways to register. We've registered 4 million people in just the past few months to vote, and we want to make sure that that becomes easier and more intuitive. And the way that we've done that is we didn't just tell people to go to this site. We partner with where they were and traffic partners like Facebook and others to drive traffic to Vote.gov. So we've used these plays, and we're going to continue using these plays, and we need you to use these plays now to get into schools to help to transform them to become next-generation learning centers. And here's the challenge that I think I tried to boil it down to for you all, GFC. The district-level customers, the superintendents I talked about at the beginning, is they have lots of resources. Nearly $1 trillion a year are spent on pre-K-12 education in America. $1 trillion a year, and that's at all levels. Only 8% of that is federal. And we are spending the second most in the world per pupil on pre-K-12 education. But we are not getting the second best results. So the resources for the administrators and the policymakers are there, but there's few incentives for them to adopt the best practices of the Games for Change community. And the inverse of that is that the student and teacher level customers have lots of incentives to do that. They want more fun games. They want more classrooms that are exciting. They want to be able to do hands-on activities. They want active STEM learning. They want active humanities. They want all of these things, but they have few resources in their control. And so resources are not the barrier. It is how we're allocating them, how we're prioritizing them, and for that we need your help, because America is spending more than almost any country in the world, but we have work to do to find a way to release those resources, to get them in the hands of the consumers, the teachers, and the students who need us most. And so the questions for us to just leave today are, how fast is this happening? I think you're going to hear just a minute about my personal vision, which is virtual reality, augmented reality. These are going to transform what classrooms look like. You can imagine today we have a computer lab in almost every school in America. It is not that far off where we have a VR or an AR lab in every school in America. And that you can actually see that as a delivery mechanism to get these ideas and these games into the hands of kids. But that the unit of change still has to be student learning. And if all we keep doing as a community is saying, let's get rid of standardized tests, let's make learning more fun, let's try to make it more interactive and interdisciplinary, those talking points are fine and we may believe them, but they have not broken through to the superintendents who control the resources. So we have to change our thinking, ask our users, including the superintendents, how to rethink their budgets and their resource allocation so that we can actually then use that tool to make the revolutionary change that we all want to see. And the last part is to make sure that every student, not just the high-income kids, not just the kids in the suburbs, have the tools to create Games for Change and not just use the Games for Change. So we have to make them possible. I showed you a picture before, the president learning his first line of code. A 7th grader from Newark taught him how to code. And his first line of code was, move forward 100. And so the question for you all is, are we ready to move forward? Are we ready to let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed? Are we really the ones we've been waiting for? Thank you so much, Games for Change.